So much time and effort is put into a product before we know whether it's going to be successful or not. This is a big hurdle for people that are trying to sell the things that they make on their desktop CNC. No one wants to spend time on something that isn't going to work. Well, in this video, we're going to go over the prototyping process, the 5 steps to the prototyping process. And I'm going to be sharing the number one thing that you absolutely have to, if you don't get anything else out of this video, you must be doing in order to see success selling the products that you make. Before we jump into the 5 steps of prototyping, I want to let you know that at the end of this video, I'm going to be sharing 2 opportunities for you to dive deeper into this topic. All right, so with all that being said, let's get right into this list. The 5 steps that we're going to be talking about today are define, develop, produce, test, and bring to market. So let's start with define. So when we're defining a product, this is the idea stage. This is where we brainstorm and where we sketch. So this step may seem obvious to you, but hear me out. This step is extremely important because it starts the iteration process. So what do I mean by starting the iteration process? So an iteration is improving on what you've done previously. So getting better, refining every time. And so if you start just with a sketch, or if you can refine a couple refinements in your head, and then a couple refinements, a couple iterations on paper, by the time you get down the line, you've already done 4 or 5 iterations on your product, rather than just jumping to the end, spending a lot of time in CAD/CAM work, spending a lot of time designing, just to have to go through those iterations. So you might as well get them done early and take the time early. So recently I have been going through this process with one of my own products, which is a map to document where we've traveled as a family. So I started thinking through this process, like I said, while I was driving, so I was able to get a lot of things thought about. We had a lot of time to think while we were driving. So I came up with this idea, almost looks like a kid's puzzle. So I want it to hang on the wall. I want it to be easy enough where my son can glue or keep track of the states himself. So I came up with like this kid puzzle idea where I cut out the states and then I cut the state map. We glue the wooden states into the map. And they're colorful, it's kind of kids themed, right? And hang on his wall. I'll share a little bit more about it on the next steps, kind of as an example as I've progressed through. So let's move to the next one, which is develop. So the develop stage consists of 2 primary things. One is doing a little bit of market research, and the second is material, sourcing material. I can't tell you how often sourcing material is overlooked, and it can break a project. You can have a great idea and move down the line, and next thing you know, if you can't source the material, if you can't source it consistently, then your hands are tied. So you need to make sure that you have access to the materials that you're going to use. While performing some brief market research, be looking for things like price point, competition. Is there anything else out there like this? And where is your audience? Where are you going to sell this? Thinking about those 3 things before you ever develop or before you ever create a product is so key. Now, you don't need to spend a ton of time here. You don't need to nail these things down, but you do need a rough idea before you move forward into the production stage. When it comes to price range, it's a range. So come up with a low and a high. You're kind of looking at what the market will bear. Now, and then you can gauge whether you're creating a high-end product and you want to fall at the top of the market, or you can beat people on price. If you're creating a similar product, you can fall at the bottom of it. So establishing that range is really important at this point. When you're looking for any of this market research, just do a simple Google search. Take your idea, put it in Google, and see what comes up. So this is the first critical crossroads in this process. You have your market research, you have your range, you have your materials. Kind of with all that information, you have to ask yourself at this point, does this make sense? Consider all that information, ask yourself, be honest with yourself, is this still a viable option? If it is, move forward. If it isn't, refine and ask yourself the question again. Back to the story about my kids' travel map. So when I took that idea to the develop phase, materials, I was like, okay, plywood makes sense for the base, except the edge. It'll make sense for the pockets where the states fit into, because you won't be able to see the plywood. So I was thinking, okay, plywood works as long as I can make the edge look good. And then the states. The states I would want to make, I could make out of plywood as well. I kind of want them to stick up like 1/4 of an inch. So then I was thinking, well, maybe I'll just go with a pine or a poplar or something like that. The next thought was, what kind of finish am I going to put on this? So I just wanted a natural wood finish for the base, but for the states, since it was going to be kids, I wanted to paint the state different colors. It was the idea I had. Painting is time consuming, and especially painting states different colors. So I was thinking through all these processes, and then I did a Google search. Is there anything out there like this? Well, obviously there's kids' puzzles. I didn't find anything marketed just as I was thinking about as a travel map for kids to keep track of where they've traveled. So after gathering this information, I came up with a price point of low end $50, high end $100. I think people are willing to spend money on this as a gift, and especially if I personalize it with a name or something like that, I think I could get upwards of that $100, $90, $85, somewhere in there. So where's my customer? This is extremely important. Now for this one, my first gut instinct was Etsy all day long. Etsy's great for gifts, great for personalized things, for kids. Typically my go-to isn't Etsy, but for this particular item, I think it would do very well on Etsy. So asking myself the question that I just asked you to ask yourself, does this all make sense? I've got my idea, my design idea kind of fleshed out. I've got my rough information. I decided to move forward. I think I felt good enough about the information I had that I could hit that price point and make these. The only question mark is whether I was going to paint the wooden pieces or not, because again, there's a lot of labor costs there. And so that is going to be a little bit of a trial. But with all that information, I felt good enough to move forward to the production stage. In this stage is where we start getting into our CAD CAM work. We've got to come up with the CAD file so we can apply our tool paths and actually physically produce the item that we're making. So some things to think about here is toolpath optimization. How many tool changes, how many, your feeds and speeds, material, your work holding, thinking about all those different things. And that is part of developing a new product, because every setup is different. And so fleshing these things out and optimizing them, your first run is probably not going to be your most efficient, and that's okay. But just take that information and learn and build upon it. For me, this is where the travel map is currently stalled. I spent a couple hours trying to get the files prepared, the CAD work, so the design work, the SVGs and DXF files, to work the way and to look the way that I wanted them to. One of the main problems that put this project on hold, I'm still going to continue it, but one of them that put it on hold is that I was trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, meaning the pockets that the states fit into their corners have a 1/4 inch radius on them. They have the same radius as the end mill does. And then when you're cutting the states, they're cutting the outside, and those are 90-degree angles. So when you're trying to fit that state into that hole, it doesn't work. Once I have that all figured out, I will be creating my first prototype, and that is the next step here, is getting all that CAD CAM work figured out and creating your first prototype. So the next phase is where we test our product out. We probably don't need to do like industrial testing and stress testing. I mean, I guess it depends what you're creating. But this is where you start iterating on the physical thing. So you made it, you can see it. Is it what you pictured in the define stage? So this is where you'll bounce back and forth a couple times, a few times, sometimes a lot of times, from the test to the produce phase. And this is where you make improvements and get your product ready to be launched. You refine everything. And now we're ready to bring it to market. That market research that we did earlier is really going to help us here, so let's build upon that. Places that you identified where your customers will be is the first place you need to go. The other thing that you need to do is establish your final price. So this is a lot easier decision now than it is at the beginning, because now you have all that information. You know the exact material, you know the exact time, and you know your exact overhead cost and your advertising cost, you know all that. And you don't need to know specifically that at the beginning. But now, with all that information, you can make that decision. So in the intro, I talked about the #1 thing that you need to do in order to see success selling the things that you make. And so here it goes. The number one thing you need to do is match your product to your audience. I cannot, if you don't get anything else out of this video, matching your product to your audience is so critical. I stumbled through this for 2 years, creating products randomly and just posting them on Etsy or my website, where I just created things that I thought was cool. And I didn't do well at all. I sold an item here, I sold an item there. And so what I learned from that is creating a product for someone specifically. The more specific you can get about that person and know where they're at, the easier it will be to sell and the more success you'll see. If you're trying to sell your items hard, like really, it's really hard to sell your items, like feel like you have to convince people, then you're not creating a product for a specific person. I think of like telemarketers. Think about how hard they work for a sale. Think about people that go door to door and knocking on doors, and they have to sell so hard because they're selling to people that most likely don't want, like they don't need their product. They're not interested in it. So if you can get your product in front of the people that you created it for, you will see so much more success. All right, end of soapbox, but I'm really passionate about that because I want to see your efforts yield results. Like no one wants to waste their time creating something that doesn't sell. If you want to dive deeper into selling the products that you make, I've got 2 options to help you out. The first one is I've created this step-by-step guide how to start selling the things that you make. Now this is truly a beginner's guide, someone that isn't already creating products and just got their CNC and wants to start creating something. It's a great step-by-step, it's a PDF, but it also has a video that goes along with it that will help introduce each step and kind of guide you along that process. The second option, many of you have asked for it in the past, and so now I'm offering one-on-one consulting for your CNC business. I'd love to talk to you about your CNC business and give you feedback and come up with a plan to reach your goals with your CNC business. So whether you're just getting started with your CNC business or it's something that you've been doing for a while and you have a new product idea and you want help fleshing it out, or you just don't know the next steps of your business, we can talk about all of that stuff one-on-one, and that way you can get direct feedback for the steps to take. If you're interested in either of those options, you can go to andybirdbuilds.com, or you can check out the links in the description below. I'll have links to both of them for you to check out to get more information. If you're not interested in either of those, I've put together this playlist right here that I think that you will be interested in. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.